Hi everyone. So again, my name is Michael. I originally grew up from Oakland, California, and went to Penn to study business. My pursuit was for social entrepreneurship from the start. And I didn't exactly know what type of business I was building, but I knew that I wanted to build a business with impact, social impact in particular. So sophomore year was really the year where I started the idea, just because it was just a random passion project that people helped with, and eventually we competed for different competitions to get some grants to really prototype a product throughout different stages into pilot programs to really track what is that possible, the potential impact at scale. So InstaHub is really the hub for instant automation with the purpose to eliminate energy waste. And in a nutshell, our first product really automates light switches without rewiring to eliminate $30 billion in electricity waste when we forget to turn off the lights. And the whole journey to this product really started when I was walking back late at night, realizing how many lights were still left on unused. And I thought, is this real? And again, we time-lapsed multiple times, and it's pretty real. I actually even surveyed nearly 200 students on campus and found that 90% of us admitted to leaving lights on unused. And I thought, but millennials, we're more progressive. We care about these type of issues. But if it's more convenient, or if there's no incentive aligned to turning off the lights, you won't see it. And then the tricky part was, well, motion sensors have existed for decades, right? A lot of the newer buildings have it. The challenge I've later learned is that rewiring motion sensors for existing buildings is really costly and logistically challenging. Most of the cost actually comes from the installation. So why not snap on your technology, your motion sensor, onto an existing infrastructure rather than replace? So this is a greener and cleaner method of automating lights. So essentially, it's faster, takes less than a minute to automate any regular light switch. It saves up to 90% of the installation costs without someone coming here, shutting down your power from the breaker and rewiring. And it's greener because you do not have to throw away something that works and put that in the landfill. That's the key aspect of the whole innovation for what InstaHub creates. So to date, it's pretty much bootstrapped. Even after graduation, we've brought the innovation to various trade shows to really gauge market demand from facility managers from across the country and the world. And people were interested. People were asking us for different things, different technical spec. The hard part was really figuring out what is the baseline, what's the version 1 that everyone can deal with, and not all the bells and whistles. Because the more you develop, the more developing costs, and probably the unit costs will be even greater. So over time, we've gone through various stages of prototype to really figure out, all right, what is that simple solution that everyone is willing to go with before we get to version 2 and 3. So, but at that time, we will still need to file for our patents, and we did an international filing for the patent. We actually couldn't have done this ourselves. My co-founder is finishing up his PhD. He's more of the technical co-founder, but we needed a lot of short-term talent. So we had a lot of interns throughout every single year, from fall, spring, even the summer. We just had to be there to lead the team. And throughout the years, we had to really fine-tune our pitch. So we've gone through competitions such as Halt Prize, where we went to the UK to compete for $1 million, and competing with different teams with different social impact ideas even forced us to think a little bit more into our business model and our impact model. So Again, we simply just want to accessibly help eliminate energy waste. I really want to make this presentation more valuable by engaging all of us into a Q&A. But first I want to ask everyone, who here wants to start their own business? By show of hands. Who here, and keep them raised if you have already started your idea. Now keep them raised if you're considering to building your company after graduation. Now keep them raised if you've made the decision to commit to that. Okay, nice. So just to really help the large range of the audience, I want to make sure to tailor this to help those who really are committed to building something throughout college and after. There's going to be a strategy and plan to really successfully execute for that. And for those who are really interested in even exploring the idea, entrepreneurship is amazing because it's just so stimulating with the abundance of knowledge that you need and mentorship you need to really understand to executing from an idea into something physical, whether it's a product or an app or a whole operation of a business. So we can start with Q&A with anything. We can start really broad, so then that can help me get to learn about where everyone's at.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So you mentioned that you had a co-founder that was more like tech-savvy. How did you go about finding your co-founder, and was it like a good friend, or did you have to try to find someone that complemented your skills?
Yeah, it was exactly that. He wasn't really a friend. It was through mutual connection. I pitched to everyone. I said, I care a lot about saving energy in an accessible way. Here's some of my research. Just pitching to people. And when people eyes, if they glister in front of you, they're like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And then we engage. If though some people will be like, oh, all right, that's cool. Then you don't lose hope. You just continue talking to more people. So I did exactly that. Got mutually connected through a friend, and I just shared with him. I said, I got a couple $100 pre-orders. I had nothing, no physical product. So he was mostly tied to the mission of eliminating energy waste accessibly.
Was he a student as well?
Yeah, at that time he was starting his PhD. So he did his undergrad and master's at Penn. And the reason why I knew that he was a fit, his robotics master's gave him the diverse experience in not only 3D printing, modeling, but also PCB design and some firmware experience. So it's not like 40 years of experience type of let me get the product out into market, but it was let me just build the proof of concept so then we can go along with that.
At what point did you fully commit to your idea?
So I guess the first year, when I was just all the ups and downs, I saw that people were pretty interested in this, and I just needed to find a way to really execute. By the time so I stayed at Penn for 5 years, so that 5th year was very valuable for me because I had to really decide full-time InstaHub. And that summer, I committed to working on InstaHub for the full summer, recruited a team, and then that whole year, I said, okay, let me take fewer classes, but commit all my time on InstaHub. And throughout that summer and that year, I knew that I will, no matter what, no matter winning a prize or not, I will commit to it.
Have you guys looked at expanding past the light switch thing?
Absolutely. So first, focus is eliminating energy waste from the standpoint of unused lighting on the conservation side. Next would be on the plug load side. So there's something called vampire load, where things plugged into a wall outlet, standby mode still draws and sucks in the energy. Back then it was 30% energy waste. Now it's probably 10 to 15% with more energy efficient appliances. So the way to solve that is either you have a power strip and you actually shut it off every single time, or have a sensor. So our core radar sensor technology can adapt with that. And then the next one will be HVAC, but it's a very hard way to really tackle heating, air conditioning, and ventilation, because that has to have a really different time interval. But tied that with the patterns of if someone's in the room and not, you can see a lot of savings over time.
Do you work on this full time now?
Yes. So our office is based at the Pennovation Center at Grace Ferry, and we do rapid prototyping and small-scale production. So we invested in half the room, like I guess half that side of the room would be like 3D printers, and we bought an automatic pick-and-place machine for the electronics, and then a refill oven to be able to solder these boards where we after post pick-and-place. So that as opposed to going to an injection molder, outsourcing the PCB assembly has saved us a lot of money, just because we had to go through various iterations, and we can't just commit to a final, a $50,000 mold tooling cost when that can be completely wrong. But that's what I found to be really amazing, because space really mattered for us. We participated at a hardware accelerator in Philadelphia called NextFab. They provided mentorship. They also kind of guided us through different stages of development, even offered contract services. But that gave us the reality of into how much does it really cost if you outsource development and production, and how much of it can you do by yourself in exchange for time. If you're not planning to raise like $1 million and then outsource everything and just focusing on the business operation, then there are some advantages of doing it in-house because you built some IP over time.
Do you have or have you been in any contact with investors and everything?
We have. So different stage type, there's early stage investors, there's later stage investors. Some investors are like, all right, Michael, when you're $500,000 rev every year, we're ready. We've invested in a couple companies in the same building, just prove the product market fit. And then early stage investors are generally alums that have seen us at the competition where Ann helped host it previously at Penn. And they're like, how much do you need? How are you going to spend the money? But that matching takes time, and it's not like, all right, here's $50,000. For some people, it could be friends and family, and they might give that $50K. But for us, we know that taking investor capital means a commitment that you eventually have to give a return to them. And some investors can micromanage, where you might just want to kind of give up. You don't want to work the way you work, and you're just probably going to build the way they want you to build. So that kind of defeats some of your innovation spirit, I think. So we're balancing between that. Yeah.
Would you say that your product is final now, or can you tell us a little bit about the prototyping journey?
Yeah.
What you learned from your first prototypes and how you got to what you have now?
Yeah. So, all right, this is Wally. Wally was version 1. My co-founder Dao prototyped this within like a week from napkin sketches. So as you can see, it's like ultrasonic sensor, Arduino type of thing. It was like this big. You can't even put that on a switch. But it got me and some people excited. It was like, well, this is a cool proof of concept. Then we thought a little bit more into, all right, what's the next prototype that can actually magnetically or Velcro onto a switch? So that was this version, and then we got a grant to get a 3D printer prototype, like a dozen of this, and we piloted in Huntsman. So it was like the building of people who operated operations for the department. they were able to test it. So the first day we tested this, half of them can actually flip a switch. So we learned that commercial grade switch tend to have a stickiness. You need like 5 newtons to push it down and back up, compared to residential switch, which is like a flip and a click. So that was the first mistake. And then the long-term mistake within that 6 months we learned was that automation quality was also another technical challenge. How do you make sure the light stays on when you're still in the room, very still? So I'm sure people still experience this even today. It's a challenge that's difficult to tackle, and it's all technology based. So, we can solve it that year. By the time we got to the next one, we shrunk the size, battery life increased a little bit, improved by automation quality by a little bit. Next version, same thing, and then eventually we said we just had to change the technology. We don't have to use a passive infrared sensor detects the change in ambient temperature. So that had a range, angle, sensitivity limitation. So we said, all right, what other sensors are there that's relatively low cost? And radar, the price of radar kind of dipped around that time. It was just hard to handle. It's so sensitive that you can detect people like through walls and windows. So now it's, how do you use this core technology, this piece of technology, to build an algorithm to understand features of people within space? And by the way, this sensor is power hungry, so it kind of did the opposite to what we needed on the battery life. And then with real customer feedback, when we did additional pilots, people were like, all right, the risk is I'm not going to buy 5,000 of these for my school if I have to change batteries every month. And by the way, isn't that a negative environmental impact if you have to keep changing batteries, right? Very valid concerns. So the next part was not to get discouraged and to really test that out. Is it at what point is it less beneficial to have this device? And the estimate is, if you can automate light switches for a month, that's still better than not having this device where you have to switch a battery every month. But all right, that aside, how do you solve that? Then it got into the firmware challenge, and then the electrical redesign of the PCB. Before we thought it was the motor, right? It's mechanical. Yes, there's a high spike in power draw, but long term, if you have something on the whole time, it's gonna deplete over time. So it took a while. It took a few years to kind of learn that on the firmware side. Right now, we're still not at a final version 1. It's this is probably one of the closest one that, let me show you. Yeah, this is probably the closest to the final one we have. The challenge before getting to this part was, how do you make more of these fast and low cost? Even if you don't make a profit now, how do you design for when you can make a profit later at scale? So we had to I hand soldered a lot of things myself, some short circuit, reliability issue. Then it's like a wild goose chase, because you're like, all right, what's exactly wrong with this? You debug, but over time that helped us build some experience in this. And the next stage right now is really designing for manufacturability and assembly, DFMA. So traditionally, for product development, there's something called EBT, PBT, and DBT. Engineering verification testing, design verification testing, and production verification testing. Generally, each stage can cost up to $250,000, and engineering verification testing really focuses on all the technical specs that you've learned from what customer needs and solve the battery challenge, automation quality challenge. And then design verification testing focuses of integrating that with the product and the aesthetics. And then PBT production verification testing focuses on designing for manufacturability so that this can be a very, very low cost so that the business can be sustainable as you scale this. Yeah, so I mean, we're still 3D printing a whole bunch of this. 3D printing, additive manufacturing is one of the most sustainable method of manufacturing. We've learned the process to really get it to a smooth finish. So right now, this looks like the glossiness of your AirPods. So that's one advantage of how we're really getting it out there without people being like, is this 3D printed? Some people can't recognize that as 3D printed. Caveat is it takes a while to print a bunch of this, so which is why we bought a lot of printers, and we had to learn how to actually automate the printers too to kind of print, push off, print, push off, print, push off, and the hard part was reliability. How do you print, push off without it, clumping or not having a good quality? Yeah. Now, I guess for those who are really committed in building something post-college, my recommendation would be to leverage your school's resource as much as possible right now. Apply for as many grants and competition as much as possible. Keep them as reserves, spend it conservatively, and then maybe even fundraise if you believe that that's the only way to. Or if you're willing to bootstrap, keep going with it. And it really depends on the business. Are you guys building like a product, service? Service?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's an advantage with that. There's like just potentially less upfront costs. Now it's just setting that up, the whole structure, and really proving that model. Yeah. Any more questions?
I have a couple, actually. Have you taken into consideration like different type light switches? Like
Yep.
this room has a gang of rocker switches.
Yeah.
Do you have a device that works to handle that?
Right now, no, it's not yet small enough to work with multi-gangs. It works with single pole and the 2-gang, not 3 or above.
And not rockers?
It works with, so okay, another part of the prototyping stage, we designed 2 different ones that worked with toggle and the rocker. And then we saw that it was the same linear motion and just figured out a design, dimension, everything, and now it universally works with both.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, and then on the market research side, we learned that 90% of North America, 90% of light switches in North America relies on either one or the other. So that was one of the key advantages when we pitched. That was like the scalability aspect of where else can you bring this to.
And what type of printers, 3D printers have you stuck with?
FDM.
Bigger technologies like FDM or you?
Yeah. Yeah, FDM, just because of this, for us, the scalability of the automation of that, literally layers, and then just push that off with the correct bed leveling and so on. So I got stuck on that part a lot myself. We had a team who focused specifically on that, but we had to transfer knowledge with one another as fast as possible, and for me, I had no clue about 3D printing. I just kind of relied on my co-founder. We used the ones at the accelerators, but it was just kind of like overbooked. There were only 3D printers. So when we first got ours, we were able to kind of customize it. So yeah, a lot of the issue initially was just bed leveling and the right temp, bed temp and the nozzle temp.
Lastly, what material did you go with the ABS or did you use PLA?
We tried ABS, PTG, but we stayed with PLA because it's biodegradable, not at scale yet. They don't really have the infrastructure to do that at scale, but it's just more sustainable, lower cost on electricity, more of a renewable type of material. And because it's indoor, it's not facing harsh UV or outdoor conditions. So I actually highly recommend, if you're building a product for indoors, try to play around with the with PLA. I think in 10, 20 years, we would have a scaled method of bringing that back into the cycle. Because PLA materials can still end up in the landfill. That's what I've learned. And that compared to like petroleum-based plastic material, it will eventually degrade, but I mean, it'll still stay there for a while unless you bring it to a processing facility. And what I envision InstaHub doing would be, if we did end up going with PLA, we would, and the end of life of the product would, so if like a building had 500 of these, I would, again, rather everyone reuse it with tax incentives to give it to the next school to prevent some teachers getting laid off, more resources in that school. But let's say it's completely out. Bring that back into the cycle for a circular economy. Melt that back down, and then into a new product.
Yeah, my understanding is PLA will degrade in 6 months to 2 years if it's wet.
Right.
If you keep it dry, it lasts for a heck of a lot longer.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand it's used in the human body for certain surgical operations, like pins and things that they want to have dissolved eventually. 6 months to a year is basically the time. They also use it to coat some pharmaceuticals as well.
Yeah, I highly recommend PLA. And it's easy. It's actually easier to print than ABS.
I find the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the dream of InstaHub is not to only build a business that builds product that reduces emission, the negative impact of the environment, but it's also keeping in mind of that whole process, the life cycle of the product from start to finish. I find that to be really challenging just because a lot of our mentors are like, Michael, don't worry about that now. Worry about surviving, so outsource this wherever. And when you scale, then you can think about that later. But I find that conflicting to my own personal values, so I have to kind of balance. So I can't be completely naive and stubborn and say, no, I'm going to do this completely green. Sometimes we have trade-offs to make, and I'm still in that stage to kind of decide which trade-offs to make.
How have you dealt with competition?
So competitions, I just applied to as many. First research which competitions are available here, nearby.
I mean competition like other people trying to do the same thing.
Oh, well, the thing is, no one will do it as passionately as you would, and there's still a lot of risk and uncertainty behind even a product like this right now. So to really prove that out, I have to take a chunk of market share from incumbent competitors to be able to say, hey, let's do it, because it's going to be capital, resources, time intensive for them to try to do everything what we did from this stage, and all the learning insights behind that, where they could easily say, actually, there's a better idea. There's another thing that I would do. So until we get a little larger, that's where things will get a little bit more challenging, because now it's first to market in this space. How do you outcompete with those with a lot of resources? So that's a whole other thing. So now brand equity is another thing, because core to our mission and story is really the sustainability aspect. I'm not really doing it for the money. I mean, I know that there could be potential later, right, in scale, but what keeps me up at night is really the potential impact that we scale, and the impact we make bring people along in this journey. When some of the engineering interns were like, whoa, this is kind of cool to compare this with class project, like actually figuring out, all right, a product that's really trying to get into market, what are the real challenges behind that? And what are the gaps in expertise that I need to kind of figure that out? So if they did go to a larger engineering company or product design firm or manufacturer, they kind of had that perspective. And to really also, because everyone who applies always talk about the mission of yeah, I want to be able to engineer products that make an impact to the environment, socially, whatever it is, that makes them feel good about it. So I guess, yeah, the reasons behind doing so. Yeah.
What is the cost of like one of these units?
$50.
Is that planning to like stay at that price or once?
It could be variable. There's a pricing structure depending on quantities. So once we get to like a national distributor, it would probably be 50% of retail. It really depends. Like, at a stage of no brand equity, they might even say, no, actually, it should be 75% discount of retail, so that we can buy 50,000. But they get more of the profit versus us taking up that risk. But it might even increase our brand equity unless they white label it, which then no one knows about this brand. So it's really up to us to really decide and saying, all right, how do we want to scale this? Right now we're doing direct. On the website, commercial customers, clients, and also residential clients can buy. A lot of our customers are really coming for the residential, but it's a different type of business. Our focus is still commercial. But B2B play it's kind of different. It's pretty different. So we have to build that relationship one-on-one with building owners, real estate investment trusts, general builders.
So as a follow-up question, I guess like for a room like a bedroom that has like one or two lights, how does it prove to be efficient enough to like how do you sell it for someone to buy $50 unit when they probably don't ever spend $50 in electricity in their...
That's a good question. So let's talk about savings or waste in general. There are 5 key factors. One is your type of technology. Is it LED, a 19-watt bulb, or a 32-watt bulb? Number of bulbs in a room. How long do you leave the lights on unused on average? And what's the cost of electricity? Like 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And then how many operating days in a year? And you multiply that by the 0.001 conversion factor. That's your annual waste. But how do you, if you have one bulb, you could kind of do a sensitivity analysis to say, what if I wasted 24 hours a day? Will I ever reach $50? It depends on technology. If it's still incandescent or fluorescent, yes. If it's not, if it's LED, maybe half of that. But for us, which is the exact reason why we focus on the commercial, because there are a lot of bulbs per square footage, and less incentive because students, staff, we're not paying for the bill. Behavior is kind of hard, but at home, parents are always like, scolding us. Turn off the lights. You're not paying for the bill. Same for spouse. But I find that the residential, my learning is that the residential, because people are a little bit more aware of that waste because they're paying for that bill, the parents are the one, they don't even ask for how much am I exactly saving. They're like, I know that there's waste. I need to save this. Versus a commercial, they want to get down to the nitty-gritty numbers of how much am I wasting? How much will I save? And each room will be different. And the hard part is how do you track unused lighting, right? Without a camera, knowing whether someone's in the room or not while the lights being left on unused. So that's where sensors or submetering system comes in, or just a sensitivity analysis, common sense of, yep, I see the lights on all the time. I don't have direct control. I can't rewire until 5 years, until I do a hard renovation. That's our key target market types of clients. Yeah.
You said you submitted a patent
Yes.
application. Could you just tell us generically what's the intellectual property around?
Yeah, so it's particularly around the design of how we attach a radar monitoring system onto a light switch and its method of not only housing but attachment. So the way we attach, it's not Velcro or anything. We had to design this to make it easy to install but hard to steal. So we essentially just use the top screw, we unwind it, and just like a picture frame, there's a little hole, you snap onto it, and there's a latch system we designed that locks it in place. So then you can't remove it unless you have a key. For a facility manager, if you wanted to remove 500 of these, it would be like 500 minutes or less if you were to go all around. So I think the unique part of this is that it's a low risk solution, meaning that if we need to prove technology, we just do it right there and then, and if it faced any issue, they could remove it versus legacy systems where you can't rewire. Excuse me. Yeah.
Would you consider a companion product, something that you could place in a room like this that would just keep track of, motions or people around?
Yeah.
With the lights on.
Absolutely.
And then you put it in a room, leave it there for a month, take it back, and then you can put that in a presentation to whoever you're selling to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or they could actually buy it or borrow it, put it in the room, and it could even calculate their savings based on the parameters you were talking about cost per kilowatt hour.
Yeah. So one of our pilots, when we were trying to track savings, we bought a submetering system, like a square D system, and they were expensive. It was like $800 with that grant, part of that grant. And we tried to install it with our pilot partners, but they had to go through the rewiring process. Thank you. Rewiring process. Past 6 months, they said, "I'm sorry, we still couldn't." So submetering is hard. Majority of buildings will not have submeters down to what's a kilowatt hour to this light switch. So the companion product, the closest one would be a $205 data logger for occupancy and light. Which kind of requires you to have a light pipe pointing to the light to know exactly if the lights were on or not, or was it the sunlight, or was it ambient light outside of this room. So we've even tried building that ourselves. We had a team focused on that, and we use some machine learning as well to certain accuracy, but in the end, it's just kind of hard unless you have almost a hardware onto the lights or to the electrical to your light switch. But for the occupancy side, which is amazing for the future of InstaHub, leveraging our core radar technology is, can we understand presence within space accurately to help you decide on what you want to do with the building, reschedule HVAC at particular set points to optimize on your savings. That's something we want to possibly help. Or the future of automation, can we do some predictive analytics to occupancy rate with how much you're going to spend in this season, or how much waste would be coming out, or maybe for an operational team in like a WeWork, is there a way to get people out of the building to temporarily save periodically in exchange for like a picnic outside, and they could do that business decision to work out. So with data, someone like a WeWork, they're using a lot of devices to figure out a lot of sensor data. It's a pretty crowded space too, but the only way to really compete in that is to really have a really strong technology, and we have to prove that at a lower cost. Otherwise it'll be a pretty uphill battle on that.
How large is your full-time team, and how much short-term talent do you have at a time?
So it's primarily me and my co-founder as full-time. In short-term, can range between 5 to 30 each season. Generally in the summer, we have a lot. I just have to negotiate for space. Sometimes we get charged a little bit, but summer is generally my favorite because everyone's really focused and like committed to their project and not worrying about school as well. Not that that's like wrong or anything. I mean, school's important, but entrepreneurship and the projects behind it, it's also an extremely valuable project experience, learning experience that it's just easier if everyone's on board. So for me, on the short-term talent, I leverage people who graduated, whether it's undergrad, master's program, and they just need experience, they'll come in. They'll actually have to make the investment too of really flying here, and a few people would. But as for full-time, I hope to really grow maybe by the next year to hire our first few full-time. We're applying for bigger grants as well that might be able to help us with that, like SBIR, which is Small Business Innovation Research Fund through the government with NSF. Yeah. Highly recommend that. Whoever's, if you have some kind of core technology, you could apply for that grant too. It's about $250,000, and then they have a second fund for $750,000.
When you were a sophomore and you chose this idea, did you have other ideas that you were considering?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to pick which one to invest your time into?
Yeah. Before this idea, I did have other ideas. So I think as like a freshman, I was just kind of exploring. They had all these different things. There's like Hult Prize competition, you know, the best social impact accelerator competition. I just joined a team of grad students in different fields. Like the challenge was, how do you create an idea to combat the disparities of early childhood education? I don't remember exactly the idea, but that was one of my first competitions. We didn't win. We didn't even get through first round. But what it taught me was, all right, how do you work with a team? How do you share your ideas? And how do you execute? And then another one was, I think, Y Prize, which leveraged existing IP from professors and researchers on campus. There were top three. It was like graphene, fast battery charging, and I forget the third one in my year. And then you got to use this technology. Think of a solution to a problem. Think of a problem where this solution will make an impact. What was my idea? I think my idea was, my idea was with a bike light. You know, the lights on your bike. I did a lot of market research, fatality rates, injury rates, and all that between pedestrian, bikers, vehicles, and so on, nighttime, daytime, drunk, not drunk. And I think it then boiled down to, did we have a lot of the fatalities happening during the nighttime because a lack of visibility or infrastructure and so on? And that led me to believe that we needed more lights on the bike. And the challenge was, well, you got to keep charging your batteries for the lights, you won't constantly see it. But in the end, I think what I've learned was that it wasn't much of an issue. I mean, these batteries can last a while, and you're not going to keep them on 24/7. So, yeah, that was a bust. But again, I learned to kind of systematically go through the stage of understanding what is the problem, and who are the users, and how do I get real users to really give me the honest, versus like having a preconceived problem and solution in my head and trying to paint that picture that, hey, I think you have a problem. You know, is this the problem? It's more kind of open-ended questions of, like for me with this product, I would have to go to a facility manager and say, hey, what's your biggest problem? What do you care most about? And they might say, I want to make sure the tenants are comfortable in my building. All right, then get a little bit more specific. How about in energy? Well, yeah, HVAC is taking a whole bunch of our electricity and energy. Lighting, hey, we're doing a lot of LED upgrades, which is good news. It's more the low-hanging recommissioning. But I can't say, hey, do you need motion sensors? But I could question later if they never get to it and say, how about when the lights are on unused? Because isn't like 0 watt better than 19 watts right? And then I can kind of understand how are they thinking. Is it even important to them? Have they thought of it? Do they even know how much they're wasting? What are the challenges for them to even know how much they're wasting? And that kind of just helps me over time.
Well, so for like a residential house, so would you need one of these for each outlet?
For each wall switch, yes. Wherever, highly recommended for areas like a basement. If someone leaves it on 24/7 and forgets it, on average, if it's like a 12-hour waste, a few bulbs, maybe it'll probably hit $50 or so.
So you have, from the presentation, you showed 5 versions, and I'm assuming currently you're working on the 6th version, which should hopefully be the final version?
Hopefully, no. But let's see. So we, to be honest, there's a lot in between as well. Like, this one's just like exteriorly, this is kind of how it looks like, but a lot of revisions are done in between. But as like big picture, yeah, the 6 should be the final V1.
So then,
V.
just version whole numbers speaking, like how long did it take for each version to go through? How much time was in between each version? Would you say?
For us, it probably took like months, year. As students. I mean, so before, when I put a lot more energy, that's where I had to really convince my team to put more energy. Like for me, doing the sales and operations and everything, I couldn't really do a whole bunch of the revisions. But over time, I had to learn how to do some of the revisions. So, which is why I love entrepreneurship. You're kind of forced to learn. But yeah, the speed of that really depended on the capacity of the team. To kind of put it more into perspective, with like one of the top product design firms, IDEO, out in Silicon Valley, you could spend $250,000. They could probably take this stage in various iterations in 3 to 6 months. In 3 to 6 months, to let you know, all right, to even tell you whether it's worth pursuing or not, but even give you a final design to kind of get this ready for production. That's because they have the expertise, they have the connections, they have their own process. Versus you're hearing it from a student entrepreneur who graduated and now building that experience and expertise. It will take a little longer. Unless, if you have the money, again, IDEO could help you really fast.
Are you waiting to have like the final version before like marketing full force?
I guess spending on ad dollars, we done some to kind of get an idea on like some of the key things investors want to know is like, what's your cost? Cost of acquisition of customer acquisition cost. But that doesn't really happen until there's like product market fit, where it's just like constantly going. Like customers are like, all right, yeah, 3D print more of these for me. I need it right now. So we're still marketing. We have to pretend like this is like the real deal. But I'm not putting all my money into marketing, because until there's that constant flow, a cycle. That's where, right now, I have to negotiate with manufacturers, distributors, and sell them on the vision that, hey, we're going to survive. This is going to be a very impactful journey, and you're going to make a lot of money too working with us. You just have to trust us now. And a lot of the challenges with manufacturers is that they expect you have the final product. They expect that you already have a lot of purchase orders to kind of really deliver, and money sometimes up front. And then maybe you develop a relationship to then pay 30 days later, 60 days later. So then you just manage the cash flow for your business. Maybe take a loan to kind of grow. So that's like a different strategy in how we can really finance the growth. But it's kind of it's hard because what's in it for them, really, right? So, yeah, I mean, I had to do a lot in really selling my way to working with them. So we do have people ready to work, help us manufacture this part with a net 30 term, for example. But then there's some application process I got to go through. And then distribution is a whole nother one because they're like, can you produce 100,000 of these in a month? And I'm like, no. What's the minimum that you're willing to work with? Which regions? Some of them might say, all right, what's in it for me? Well, I want exclusivity for 2 years in this region. And I'm like, So for me, I'm like, how do I navigate this? I have to give up something to get something. What's worth it? Because something is better than nothing. But how confident am I bringing it to this stage at that time? If I'm wrong, what's the opportunity cost of not taking that deal? So it's a whole lot of confusion a lot of times. But again, that's part of the learning opportunity. I think I would argue that this whole education journey has been the most fulfilling for me so far. I've even actually integrated. I found classes to supplement the areas that I lacked in the business building. So I try to bring theory into practice. But sometimes when you practice, you'll learn the theories, and you'll just learn the name for the theories. But yeah, it's a really fulfilling journey, I think. I think for everyone in here, if you are slightly interested in building something, it doesn't even have to be a product. It could be a service. It could be any type of business. I highly recommend it to focus more on an impact, any disparities in the world that you see that you can fill in the gap for, any social issues, because it makes it more fulfilling. But if not that, entrepreneurship in general will teach you so much where you'll be up. You'll probably maybe skip a class or so, or that literally was me. Like, I stayed up late to really work on this when I get bored on class stuff, and then some of the sacrifices you make behind that.
Any more questions?
Yeah,
Thank you, Monica.
of course.